Hello, everyone. We are now jumping straight into episode 8B. You probably just finished episode 8A and tend to release both these videos back to back. This is continuing that conversation about our drills, make our drills count. As you remember from the previous episode, we were talking about the importance of drills and the Morgan Stanley story on what happened on 9/11 and the importance of a simple fire drill and how a simple fire drill saved nearly 3,700 lives that day simply by actually doing a full fire evacuation drill. I also title it as Make Your Drills Count, Advance Your School Drills, because the Make Your Drills Count. When we first started teaching and getting schools into taking drills seriously and started holding them accountable for the drills that they were supposed to be doing under the law, but also to do what's right by their students, when we started having this fight, the most common thing we would get as pushback, when we got pushback, was primarily from teachers complaining about how these fire drills or these active shooter drills or whatever the drill was are interruptions to instructional time. They very, very much want to hold tight to, you have so much instructional time, we have to cover so much material, and any one of these things becomes an interruption to instructional time. This is my argument and retort to that. Because if you are a teacher and you've thought that, which many probably have, like, man, this really interrupted this test or that study hall or whatever it was. Or if you have a friend who's a teacher who has thought that or even said that, this is my retort. Drills are instructional time. They are a higher priority of instructional time because what your kids do in drills in your school, in your classroom, how you perform and teach them to drill, they will carry with them the rest of their lives. And that has been proven time and time again amongst critical incidents. I've shown you in past videos, and you can go back in, where people who are still doing duck and cover, what did they do when there was a shooter in their presence? They ducked and covered when they probably should have gotten up and gotten out, when they should have evacuated. They ducked and covered. We have to take this seriously because this will carry with them far more than that spelling test or that math quiz. You will have plenty of time to circle back to the information. Take your drill seriously. They will carry this with them, and they will perform the way you are. They will follow your lead. So with that, let's make our drills count, and let's learn how to advance our drills, because you do the same thing over and over, it's going to get boring. It's going to get dull. Before we begin, though, I told you I was going to share this photo from the last conversation about the Morgan Stanley story. This is Rick Rescorla, the hero of 9/11. At least from the Morgan Stanley perspective. One thing I failed to mention is that of the 6 people of Morgan Stanley who died on that day, Rick was one of them. He was last seen on the 10th floor, making his way back up after evacuating all of Morgan Stanley's employees. He was making his way back up, trying to get more people or other organizations out of the building. And the other people that were with him, the other 6, including him, were also other security personnel doing the same, following his lead and helping. This is a photo of Rick when he was younger. If this photo looks familiar, it's because it comes from the cover of the book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. That he was on the cover. That was Rick when he was a young platoon leader. You may have seen the movie, We Were Soldiers by Mel Gibson, but the book and the story of the book are very valuable, very much a leadership understanding. Great stories. Learn about Rick and what he did that day and take an example from Rick's book. So now you've already seen this animation. You get a notification. We use this for active shooter, active threat. But now let's apply it to fire drills. So you get your notification. You hear the announcement of fire by hearing a fire alarm go off. Boom. Even during your drills, you should be practicing this. Instead of just getting up and immediately evacuating, first, set up on that door. Because why? If your notification of a fire is the fire alarm being activated, how do you know there's a fire? You don't. How do you know that it's safe to even go out that door? You don't. You still have to make an assessment. Even if it's not an active threat, active shooter scenario, you still need to make an assessment. Now, let's say you had a fire drill earlier in the day, and then suddenly you hear, towards the end of the day, a fire alarm go off again. Oh, well, should you evacuate? Yes. And treat every single incident as though it's a real thing. Even if you know it's a drill, practice like it's a real thing. That happened in the Parkland shooting. They had a fire alarm, fire drill earlier in that day. At least that's what the reports came out, that they had already been poison triggered for the fire evacuation. So that when they heard an alarm later on in the afternoon, they thought, well, that's weird. Well, hey, better get up and evacuate. They're already primed and ready. But what they do? They immediately evacuated. They were not making assessments. So set up. Your fire alarm goes off. First thing you do, teacher, I don't care what age your kids are. They can be high schoolers, they can be little kids. First thing you do is you get them set up along that wall. And it might look different. It might be this wall in your classroom because it makes more sense. Different spaces, it makes more sense to be in one spot than the other. But you're going to set up and you're going to make an assessment. Where is my threat? Where is my fire? Is it going to be safe to go? Do I smell smoke? Let me touch that fire handle or doorknob. Is it hot? Am I safe to leave? Then you do evacuate. If you hear no other threats, you don't hear sounds of violence, if you're not sure if there's a fire, yes, evacuate. But first, make that assessment. Okay? Here's your fire drills right here. Start here. And then your other emergency drills, like your active threat drills, will also be right here. We keep it simple because eventually you're gonna have to get out of the building one way or another, whether it's a fire, whether it's an active threat, whether it's an earthquake, and now you gotta get up, get people in position. Hey, is everyone here? Get accountability. Now let's check. Is it safe to even exit the building? Let's say there's an earthquake. That is one of those scenarios. So this is where you start with your drills, and start with your fire drills. If it's hard for you to come up with a way to have a proper, appropriate conversation with your students about active shooter or active threat, then start with your fire drill. Fire drills saved lives. They've proven to throughout time. Remember, when you're making your assessment, breathe, use your senses, think. The purpose of this is to make an assessment and to think. All right, now let's talk about advancing your drills. Where do you begin to advance your drills? Well, like I said, let's start with your fire drill. Let's start there. There are ways of advancing active threat active shooter drills, and maybe I'll at another time come back and circle around to give examples of this. But let's start with a fire drill. And the same concepts I'm going to give you with a fire drill can be applied to all of your drills. First, your first drill is going to be your standard drill. So if this is going to be a fire drill, your basic goal of the fire drill is an evacuation. So you set up on the door, make an assessment, practice evacuating with your students. The goal is primarily getting the students and staff accustomed to evacuation routes and getting accountability. That is an important practice piece. And it's we got to do stepping stones. We're not going to start our first drill running and having all sorts of crazy scenarios. We're going to do building blocks. And you do this each year. Let's say you have 3 fire drills per year. All right, well, this is going to be number 1. Each year, it's okay to be like this. Yes, have a scenario. Come up with a scenario that's realistic. That, hey, at 10 a.m. on Thursday, the fire evacuation alarm was activated for some reason. We're going to practice the evacuation. There's no other threats known or hazards. And then we'll determine, once we have accountability, that the building is safe and we'll re-enter the building. There's a scenario, a basic one, all right? The drill is announced and known to the day, but not the time. That's important. In this drill, it's okay to say, hey, on this Thursday, we're gonna have a fire drill. The goal of this drill is this, to practice accountability and practice fire evacuation routes. That's okay. We're gonna have it on this day. Don't announce the time though. Keep that limited to only a couple of people. And the people who know that information should not always be the principal or the vice principal. I think I will have to come back and do another drill conversation, maybe a part C to this. Actually, I'll do it at a later episode because I want to get on to other information, but we're talking about observers, controllers, people who are part of facilitating the scenario, but are outside of the scenario. Those people need to change all the time. The people who know when this is happening, they need to change all the time because you need to get used to not knowing. But it's okay to have this one known to the day. It's gonna be on Thursday at some point during the day, but don't let the time be known. Let it be a little bit of a surprise because that creates a mild degree of stress, and that's okay. We want mild degrees of stress. Second drill, we're gonna start to advance this drill a little bit more with more specific scenarios such as, hey, there's a fire in the hallway blocking those exits. The drill is known to the week, but not to the day or time. So we're making it a little bit less known. Less people, 1 or 2 people know when this is gonna happen. pertinent people for this, and that can be decided among you should have a safety team if you're in a public school. This needs to be less known of when. But you can practice a scenario by having actual fire traffic cones represent the fire in the hallway. You come out, you make your assessment. If you see a fire cone outside your hallway along your typical route, that means, excuse me, talking so much, I'm yawning right now. So you see a cone, that means, hey, the fire is there, the hazard is there. We cannot evacuate that way. We're gonna have to turn around and evacuate a different exit. It might not be for every single classroom, but you can pick a couple of random locations and keep it different year to year. But you start to advance your drill like that. It is not known to the week, but to the day or time, or it's known to the week, but not the day or time. You can say, hey, this week we're gonna do a fire drill sometime this week. It's okay to do that. And make sure it's at a different day and time than your first one was. Okay, always pick a different time. Drill 3, this is where we're gonna start adding a lot more things to it. This is where I would recommend you start to add in some of the incident command needs. And we can probably make episodes discussing incident command structure for schools. There's plenty of information out there. Some of it I think is just confusing. And if you take any of the ICS training, which most, I believe, staff members, at least principal teams, have to take the ICS training from FEMA. I always felt like, maybe they've gotten better over the last couple of years. I haven't seen more recently, but I always felt like they were confusing and poorly presented. And they don't really address a lot of the basic conversation needed to what do you actually do. So that's my opinion though, but we want to start adding in some of those instant command needs, such as, hey, a search and rescue component to it. You get out to the field and you have accountability. Oh, guess what? Somebody's missing. Now you could choose to have somebody stay behind, a staff member or a willing and capable student, or you could even just use stuffed animals. And that's what we used to use with some of our staff members. Makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to actually look for a kid. Everyone gets to practice evacuating. But then you can say, hey, there's missing persons in these somewhere in the school. Go and look for them. They're last seen in this classroom. Or you could even make it less than that, But you have students that are suddenly missing. Gets you to practice with teachers raising the flag saying, hey, I have somebody missing. Gets you to practice how quickly and how long does it take you to get your search and rescue team organized. And they should know their role beforehand, but that's another conversation. And gives you the practice of them going out, conducting a search, and then coming back. So this is where we start to really advance things. You can also make the advancement of happening at an extremely inconvenient time, like say during the lunch hour. That does happen. I remember when I was actually in basic training, we were at breakfast and the fire alarm went off. And we actually looked around each other like, should we go? Should we eat? We only have like 5 minutes to eat anyway. Should we quickly eat or not? And so they eventually, and we had a drill sergeant yelling at us to keep eating, and eventually they got yelled at and told, no, you got to evacuate. And so that's another funny story. But that would be a good time to really make it an inconvenient time. Make it when it doesn't feel like it should be. You're now have already practicing less and less convenience. It's good, make it less convenient. So that's just, start there. Start with your fire drills. And then we can apply these same concepts to active threat, active shooter. I will talk more about that in a separate episode. I'm starting to get pressed on time, and I want to make sure I cover a few drill do's and don'ts. So do make up realistic scenarios for your drills. Hey, a fire occurred in the hallway. Smoke started coming out of the kitchen. Do make your dates and times different and at times of inconvenience. We just talked about that. Don't do the same drill the same way at the same time every time. I don't care if it's convenient for instructional time. Don't do it. It's not good for you. It's not good for your students. You know what this resulted in? We're going to take you all the way back to Columbine High School shooting. Those kids got used to having their fire drill at the same time, at the same day. It was like 2 or 3 times a year. And it was always at like second period at this time. So they knew what was going to happen. When did the fire evacuation system get triggered for that, active threat event? It got triggered at lunch. So what did everyone do? They sat around and looked at each other, not knowing what to do. They didn't evacuate. Now, in some argument, that kind of was in their favor, but they did not do what they were trained to do. because they weren't actually, I guess I could say no, they were not trained to do anything. So they did exactly what they knew to do, nothing. They were not trained to respond. They're not trained to make an assessment. So don't do it at the same time every time. You got to change it up. It benefits you, benefits students, helps you with your mental processes in general and learning how to deal with unique and different situations and applying the same concepts. The make an assessment, determine where are my exits, what am I going to do now? Do you talk to your kids? Do you talk to your kids at all ages? This is not easy, and again, this will have to be another episode. You have to talk to them even about active threat, active shooter. I was amazed at how graphic and frightening the thoughts are of young first and second graders when it came to this conversation. Too many kids playing way too many violent video games, in my opinion. But it's already on their mind. That's the reality. You're going to have to deal with it. And there are ways of approaching it, age appropriate. But do talk to them ultimately about why, what the purpose is. Don't do a lockdown drill and tell your kids nothing's going on. Just be quiet. I'm going to turn off the lights. Nobody worry. No, tell them. They're going to freak out if you don't tell them. Information is key. And even for the youngs, you can simply tell them, hey, we're doing an active threat drill today, or we're doing a lockdown. It doesn't even have to be active threat. It can just simply be a lockdown drill. There's many reasons to have a lockdown that doesn't involve active threat. Again, another video, another time. Practicing lockdowns with kids and letting them know we're going to be doing this. Or, hey, that's our notification that we're going into lockdown. And it's an educational opportunity. Don't avoid or disregard questions, as ridiculous as they may be. Like I said, questions go off the wall. Another episode, I'll talk about some of those questions. Do include everyone in the drill. Everybody. I'm talking about the two most forgotten populations. First, on the staff side, your support staff, whether it's janitors or even, more importantly, the cooking staff. They need to be included. They need to be a part of it. They need to evacuate too. Even if in the middle of cooking. That is a reality. They are much a part. They are so forgotten all the time. Commonly, they look around, they're like, well, what's going on? Include everyone in the drill. Everybody. Every staff member. The drill is for everyone, not just the students. Include everyone in the drill. The other population that's commonly forgotten is our special needs, our access and functional needs kids. Maybe these kids have physical and or mental handicaps. And those staff members have a heck of a time trying to work with them. And many of these kids can be triggered by sounds like the fire alarm. Okay? Work with these staff members, though. They're very eager to develop and create training for those kids to help them and gives them an opportunity for more instructional time that's outside of the norm with their kids. So include them. Make sure you don't forget them. They are as big a part of the student body as anybody else, and they're going to need just as much help. Ensure every staff member is familiar with the incident command structure. Yeah, be at least familiar with the basics. And this would be a completely another conversation, but everyone needs to have a job more than just watching the kids. That will be some of people's jobs. But you understand, in a critical incident, doesn't matter if it's a fire, doesn't matter if it's an earthquake, doesn't matter if it's an active threat. When these situations happen, you have to have a basic structure that everyone knows what their role is going to be when it happens. Do empower every staff member to make decisions without you. Believe it or not, many principals have problems with having their staff members make decisions without them. You shouldn't. You're not always going to be there. The principal will not always be the instant commander of an event. They won't always be there at the school. They are commonly being called out to go back to the district headquarters or wherever the place may be, or other events. You have to trust your staff, and the only way you can do that is through practice and training. So that's really a message primarily for our principal teams. And the truth, the same goes for even our students. Empower students to make leadership decisions absent your presence. All right, that's what I have today for this episode. We're going to circle back to some more things later on. I'll decide what my next episode is once I release it.